Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning time, you know, we start a little slow, but this is actually my most creative time of the day. I get my best work done in the morning. So this panel is going to be different than a lot of them. We're going to have a lot more audience participation. So I want you to feel free to, at certain points, yell out things when we ask for answers. You don't have to raise your hand, just shout it out, and we're going to do a little bit of, I guess, call it design improv, as we try to figure out what the product is that we're designing. We left it blank because we didn't want to know ahead of time what we're going to do. So we're going to figure out as we go. So this is either going to be the best panel of the day or the worst panel of the day, depending on the ideas that come out. And the last thing I want to say about this is if you haven't been in brainstorming sessions, remember there's no bad ideas. It's like improv. It's yes and. So no one's ideas are stupid. We can do the critiquing later. Right? This is all about being free and having fun. This process only works when you have fun. All right, let's go. So I don't know why panels always start with the introduction. I think you probably already read it if you decided to come here. But I've been working in spatial computing for 30 years now. I have a picture from 30 years ago that says spatial computing. That's how I can prove it. And worked on a bunch of really interesting projects. So I'm going to just give you a selection of those. So started out at Disney with my first really big job working on this VR ride that inspired a whole bunch of people, including me. That was Aladdin's Magic Carpet, where you can fly through the world with this super heavy VR headset that was so heavy that it had to be suspended from the ceiling. You couldn't wear it. But got to work on a bunch of cool projects over the years. Google Earth, before it was Google Earth, when it was still Keyhole. I helped write the code for Second Life that builds all the objects. I helped start the HoloLens. I helped start Amazon Echo Frames. And I was an early member of the Apple Vision Pro team when it was still pretty small back in 2016. And I'll try to talk as much as I can about these things on the next slide. I am a little bit limited in what I can say about Apple. I still have NDAs with them. And now Julian.
So the segue from Avi to Julian is that we were at the very first startup I was at in Seattle.
Yep. Mine first too, right before that Disney job, World Design.
Yeah, it was called World Design, and it was a VR startup back in the first generation of VR. I was at the University of Washington at the Human Interface Technology Lab, and Avi, you were just kind of a free radical at the time. I always thought that you were at the HIT Lab, but you weren't.
I was not at the HIT Lab. I drove cross country to come join this company, knowing nothing.
Yeah.
I just get my station wagon to drive. That was it.
Yeah, and so same for me. I basically talked my way into the lab, which was a beautiful thing at that time when no one really knew what VR was. When I joined the lab, I was like, hey, does anyone have a lab manual? Someone said, just sort of looked at me as sort of like slightly hippie guy. He was floating maybe 2 centimeters off the ground, and he said, go get a copy of William Gibson's Neuromancer. And that just kind of made my head explode. I was like, the manual for the lab is a science fiction novel. And that just kind of plugged something into my head, that something interesting and weird was going on here when no one really knew what they were doing, but their reference point was William Gibson's Neuromancer. So that kind of set me on a trajectory where I was really fascinated by the relationship between these imaginative creative practices like science fiction and even going further like film fiction, and the ways in which they shape and inform our ideas and our insights and our perspective and our opinions and our understanding of the not true yet, the things that could be. And I wanted to find the way to almost like operationalize that relationship, to not make it something that was just sort of happened in the background, but that we could talk about and understand so that we could make productive and kind of use of these particular kinds of practices to help us shape and inform the kinds of worlds that we want to inhabit. So here's some of the things that I've done. It's kind of an eclectic mix because I'm a really bad employee, I realize, because there's so many different things I want to do. So I end up working on my own with stuff. In the center there, you see a kind of peculiar looking device. That was a company that I started about 8 or 9 years ago. I sold the company 2 years ago. And in my mind, it was like this physical design fiction. I wanted to know, could you have a kind of sports tracker that didn't have a digital display? And it was the kind of thing where people were like, I don't get it. Why would you ever want to do that? And that's enough for me to kind of get going on something, because it's a question. Why would you want that? What kind of world might we live in that's sort of adjacent to the one we have now, where we assume that anything that is digital or computational has to have a kind of flat, rounded rectangle LCD display. And I'd made some prototypes of it that all got kind of carried away, and pretty soon people are like, hey, you should build a company, which I don't know if it was the best idea, but I did it, and worked on that for quite some time. And it became a way for me to understand about these kinds of relationships between ideas and speculation and how they kind of shape and inform people's own understanding and expectations. And it did remarkably well. It was like very artisan project. 2,000 of them exist in the world. People still want them, but I needed to move on to something else, so I sold the company. And then around that is Near Future Laboratory, which I've reinvested time and energy into, and which sort of represents one of the reasons why I wanted to participate in this panel with these fine folks. And some of the things that we do there is like essentially make artifacts from the future, things that help us sense into possible futures through a tangible representation. And so one of the canonical projects was this TBD catalog, which the esteemed Bruce Sterling participated in the workshop that we did, to imagine a possible future, but rather than kind of writing a research report or even making a film about it or writing a short story, we would actually do it in the form of a product catalog, as if we had gone to that future like archaeologists, but rather than digging into the past, we kind of dug into the future, found this product catalog, and just kind of looked at each other puzzled, like, what is this thing? And then flip through it and sort of understand and make sense of the world through these kind of implications. What are the things that people want to own? What are their fears, concerns, and desires as represented by ads for some kind of medical supplement or kinds of food that they eat or the kinds of entertainment that they prefer? You can infer a lot about people and this sort of like collective psyche through these kinds of material artifacts. I mean, we live in a world in which our whims and our kind of insights and our perspectives are all represented for better or worse, through consumer capitalism. And then we did, of course, the Manual of Design Fiction, which is our kind of how-to manual, and the follow-on book, It's Time to Imagine Harder, which is the why do we want to do this, more of a kind of existential question. All these things you can get at shop.nearfuturelaboratory.com.
Awesome. Andrea, you're up.
So about 10 years ago, I was having a great career in New York as an architect designing skyscrapers. And all of that was going pretty well, but there was a problem. Although I loved architecture and I loved design, I was pretty unhappy. And there were two things that were really missing from that beautiful career and life. I had this thing since I was a child that I can talk with computers. My dad taught me how to program when I was very, very young. And I really wanted to do software development, but there was no way I could see that would allow me to combine actual designing buildings with producing software products. And the second problem that I had was that I loved asking what I call fundamental questions. So I did not major in philosophy in college, but I took so many philosophy classes I could have majored 2 times over. And I just loved asking things like, all right, but how do we completely rethink why people have to live in apartments made out of these boxes that are rooms? Why do people have to access these apartments through doors that are arranged in this particular way? And the answer was, of course, because that's how people behave. And then I would go, okay, but who taught people how to behave that way? And this annoyed the hell out of everyone. So with this conundrum, I started to look into what are my options. And I discovered that I have none. There is no career path for me that allows me to still be an architect, still design buildings, do software products and programming, and ask fundamental questions. And when that became crystal clear and very fast, the only possible choice was to just start my own company, which I did. And it's called NOMENA. We describe ourselves as a design and interaction studio, which only covers a very small part of what we actually do. And we're based in Germany. And most of the projects that we work on actually allow us to tackle all those three things: fundamental questions, architecture, and software development. To give you a bit of an idea about what work we do, we have designed Spectra Cities, which is a virtual tool of parts that allows you to design real cities of up to 1 million people. We worked on that with Ryan Japetsky, who's sitting right there from Spectra Cities. We just released a tool, a virtual reality application that is a combination between what they call a productivity tool that allows you to design architecture in virtual reality and a game. We're having a very hard time talking to people about what this is and finding the right distributor, because people are asking us, okay, is this for our productivity department? And we say yes. And then others are asking us, is this a game? And we say yes. And no one knows what to do with it. Except the users, they're getting a hang of it. And lastly, we are working on a project called The Third Pill. And this is a virtual reality game that where the action, half of the action takes place in complete darkness. So half of the levels you play, you try to find your way out of this simulation labyrinth. And half of the time you're navigating a research facility, because it's a game, without seeing anything. So we're using spatial sound and interaction. You move your head around, and imagine you have like the dolphin sonar attached to your head, and wherever you move, you hear a feedback noise as if you have just touched some object there. And this is how we allow you to navigate these vast grounds and interact with characters without ever showing you anything. And we've run a bunch of tests for this, and the most amazing thing is that our testers have told us that everything that happens in the dark, so all the levels where we're basically forcing their brains to see things with their mind's eye, feel completely real. Whereas whenever we actually show them visuals, it's obvious that it's computer generated.
That's awesome. Okay, so we are going to shift gears slightly and now talk about how do each of us imagine harder in our own work. And we picked the three of us because we all do different things, right? We're not all in the same space. So let's briefly do this because we're running a little behind on this part. So, Andreea, first, how do you imagine harder?
Like I mentioned already, I love to ask these fundamental questions, and we've been very fortunate to work with people and projects that allowed me to ask together with the team these fundamental questions. When we worked on Spectra Cities, our virtual city project, we had all of these amazing work sessions with Ryan and his team, and we just asked things like, yeah, why do people go from A to B? What exactly moves them? To what extent can we rethink that? What is the border when it comes to architectural design between what human bodies naturally do because of our biology and physiology, and what are the things that human bodies do in the domestic space and in the urban space that we have programmed to do? And based on potential answers to questions like that, we have started to rethink at a pretty fundamental level what urban space could possibly look like.
Okay. Julian?
Yeah, I do the thing that's not necessarily expected or understood if there's a big question. So, for example, what's the future of AI? Someone's going to ask you. And I say the question that I want to ask is like, what's for breakfast in a future with AI? And try to ground things into the tangible that people can relate to, so similar to the product catalog. You know, what are the things that people are doing? You know, asking that question that kind of provokes someone, and I think it's the kind of question that stops someone in their tracks, because they're like, it's a good question. Now let's try to riddle through it. And so my thing is to make things really as grounded as possible into the lived experience of normal humans.
Awesome. And I guess I have to answer the same question now. How to imagine harder? And my job is typically working as a prototyper, and In the case of Apple, the title was Senior Manager in charge of experience prototyping. And just real briefly, what that is everything that you might want to put into a product, you always prototype. You want to try ahead of time. And the goal of the prototypes is to find the magic, find what gets people excited, but also answer questions. So every stakeholder is going to have questions. Every stakeholder is going to have concerns. Will it be this? Will it be that? Will it be too much? And the prototypes, good prototypes, are designed specifically to answer questions, right? You don't just prototype because it's fun and I want to be creative. There's a person who can kill your project and they need to be reassured. So in some sense, we're building confidence in the idea of the final product. But the good thing is you don't have to build it like the final product. You can take shortcuts. So I actually called the lab that we worked in Kobayashi Maru because it was all about cheating. It was all about taking shortcuts to get to the final answer, but they have to be persuasive. They have to really show people. So for Keyhole, we needed to figure out how to take some really cool technology and turn it into a product that was fun to browse the earth. Microsoft started, HoloLens started in Xbox. It started as an entertainment device, so we had to figure that out. And Apple really, they've talked about this. They needed to figure out how to make a device that would be pro-social, not anti-social. And so a lot of the thinking had to do around that and that particular problem. Okay, so moving on to the next section. This is where we get to the audience section. So I'm going to need to type while we do this. We're going to ask you to name a whatever, and you can shout it out, and I'm going to rely on my co-host here to funnel that to a single answer. All right, and I'll be busy with the typing, and so.
If anyone's familiar with MadLibs, okay, yeah, here we go. And this is just one of those kinds of approaches that helps with that.
Yeah, and starting from a blank slate is great because we don't want to have preconceptions about this. So this is meant to be fun as well. It only really works if it's fun. So let's start out. We're going to have six things to name, just like any MadLibs. You write them before you know how they're going to be used, and that's where it gets crazy. So let's ask the audience to shout out superpowers, and then we'll pick one to put in the box.
Empathy. Flying.
I like empathy.
Wisdom. Infinite kindness.
Oh, wow, that is a superpower.
Okay, so that one. Next one. Name a common place, a place that we might visit, often every day. That's a good. She said. All right, we'll do that.
Everyone knows what that is.
Okay, name an animal to be inspired by.
Sloth. It's going to have to be sloth.
It's going to have to be sloth. Okay, now we want to name a typical action, something that people would do every day, at least once.
Bagel.
I thought she said giggle.
Brushing your teeth?
Brushing your teeth, okay. Okay, name a well-known brand.
Too well known.
Which one are you going with?
Lego?
Lego? Okay. I'll do anything. And the final question is name a product category. Liquor? What else? That's a category for sure. Building materials. Any more? What was the last one? Snacks. What do you think?
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Pick one though.
No idea. I can't even remember the subject anymore.
Okay, so there's what we picked, and then by the magic of Keynote, it is now formed into a sentence for us. Lego has decided to build a snacks product that gives you the ability to have empathy for the bathroom that helps people brushing their teeth inspired by sloths. Thank you very much for this design brief. This is not going to be easy. Okay, So that's what we have. The first thing I'm going to do is just make this a little more grammatical, right? So I'm going to just copy and paste this onto the next slide. But start thinking, this is where we put our creative hats on. Let's start thinking about products that fit this design brief.
And what I find helpful is like try to imagine if you got this as a brief and you're the ad agency for Legos, say, and they're like, this is what we got. And now how would you represent this if everything depended upon it? If your year-end results at your ad agency depended on you getting this locked in, what might be like the full-page ad that you might see in a magazine or the billboard or the TikTok ad that kind of represents this? And I often find that, you know, when you dig into it, the first reaction, so it's good. The first reaction is like comical, like what the heck? And then you go to the next step, which is you start visualizing, like imagining the thing that you would see when this were translated into something that actually existed. And then you almost start finding the way in which you sense into the world in which this would exist.
All right. So now we're getting a little more grammatical. Now let's think about what else we want to fix about this. So I think it's okay to add a little bit of rationality to it if it's totally out of the park, but we're getting close, actually. Lego has decided to build some snacks. I don't know if Lego's ever released food, but maybe I've gone to Legoland. They have some Lego branded things there, but they don't sell them all over. But gives you the ability to have empathy for, what do you want to say, in the bathroom or for people in the bathroom, or how do we want to improve
So
that?
here I would almost like assume that bathroom is assumed because you got the brushing teeth.
Yeah,
So
those
it's
go
so
together.
Parenthetical.
Yeah. And the sloths is a good inspiration. I think thing that comes to mind there is that people don't spend enough time brushing their teeth. Something that maybe lets people take longer in the bathroom. Still not sure about the empathy part. We'll have to figure out how that fits in.
Well, I think
About people with bad breath.
Yeah, well, I think sloths are also known to have bad breath. So
yeah, let's assume that they are. They look like they should.
for kids, I think the Lego brand is a good brand that appeals to kids and adults. I have like a million Legos at home. But yeah,
Like nice, like the sloth is like this kind of peculiar creature that you could see kids relating to, just because it's like, what is that? And there's a little maybe educational component. The sloth is whatever Wikipedia says. And I think that connection to empathy and sloth, the image of a sloth that comes in my mind, I don't know if it's right, but it's like, it's got kind of buck teeth. Does it have buck teeth?
I think it has big teeth. Yeah, it's
kind
a
of
plant eater, so it's got to be able to cut
Yeah.
the plants. And the thing about sloths I like too is those big claws that they have.
that's right.
But they're really gentle, right? They look like they could rip you to shreds, but they move so slowly that you could get away.
Yeah. So I almost see like this, it starts tipping into like the snack is actually good for you, and maybe it's got some component in it that helps with cleaning your teeth or like stain removal or breath. Maybe it's a mint. It's in a typical consumer packaged good kind of vibe. Maybe it looks like a sleeve of Lifesavers. And you start sensing into this world in which essentially, you know, we're taking it, rather than it's not a high-tech thing, right? There's no AI component of this. But we're just imagining into translating that really abstract brief into something that's like, okay, I sort of get it. The sloth is like a character logo kind of thing.
Yeah.
It belongs within this world. And maybe to your point, it's like the Lego thing is, where does that tie in? But maybe it's something that is as you said, like it's something that you can get at Legoland.
Yeah. Yeah. It should come with bricks too, though. I think something where in the process of brushing your teeth slowly, so you spend the full 2 minutes, right, that you're supposed to spend, something about that has to give the same, you know, appeal of Legos, of having constructed something or built something. But the snack part puts me in the opposite mindset of thinking, what if it were like Oreos and you have to get rid of them all? Like you eat them and then your teeth are all covered and now you can tell if you've brushed or not because it'll still be there until you actually erase it all. Yeah. Something like that. Does that work for you, Andrea? Do you have ideas on that?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
That's good. That sounds okay. Yes.
How about a toothbrush that you assemble yourself that comes in a package that has a little stack that you do have to get off your teeth?
Love it.
Love it.
I love it. Okay, done. You're hired. You're hired. You're hired. That's a winner. Winner, winner, you get a hat. Congratulations. Yes, nice round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I want to add that what we're doing here and what Julian is starting to break down is basically the assumptions. So our proposition is that to really have an open mind when prototyping things that are supposed to be for the distant future, you really need to be careful about the assumptions. And when we get what we call a normal brief from a client, it's very easy to have a lot of things that are not questioned. But by forcing something nonsensical, you have assumptions about each word in there and each concept, but you can't make too many assumptions when it comes to the whole brief because it makes no sense. So you just need to stop, properly contextualize every single term in there, and then see, okay, where are you going? So this may look incredibly silly and a waste of time on the surface, but we are actually proposing a very serious methodology in approaching a client brief when it comes to such high stakes like designing the future, because we realize the title of our panel is quite heavy.
All right, so I think we got as close to what you said as possible. I couldn't type it exactly as you said it, but that was great. And so now we're going to take you through the process that you would do after you picked the design brief. And many of you have been through similar processes before. I'm sure there's a bunch of designers in the room. We're just going to lay down a simplified process that will work through this product to help refine what we're talking about. I think we're starting to get a sense of it. So, of course, you want to start with the customers, right? I think that's important for any product to be successful, is people are going to need to want it. So the very first question to ask is, who is it for? I think from the previous slide, maybe we have a sense of who this product is designed for. Anyone want to say it? Kids, I think. I think it's a good, the Lego brand, of course, works for adults as well, but the idea that we need to teach kids to brush their teeth better and have empathy, I think that works. So I'm not going to edit the rest of the slides, but let's just remember. And who is it not for? Busy people who can't take the time to brush their teeth, sure.
I have a slightly different take, and maybe there's some overlap with the great idea, which I didn't fully catch all that, but I'm just going to reiterate. So when I read the sentence, for me, I keep thinking that it's a robot helping me brush my teeth. Like, I think of my electric toothbrush as being some little robot that was programmed and trained to brush my teeth with a certain frequency, and sometimes I feel it doesn't have enough empathy for my gums because it's going too fast, and I wish it had more ways for me to adjust it. So when we think we live in a world where everything is connecting with IoT and everything is running all of these algorithms in the background to figure out what is it that we really need without even asking us, I'm reading this as the need to teach all of these objects and robots and all of these interconnected stuff, empathy for how we might feel when we are getting all of this help.
Okay, so we'll leave it open in a kind of quantum mechanical way, that it could be potentially a robot that helps you brush your teeth. It could be a self-assembly toothbrush. We have another idea, and we don't have to decide that yet. We want to explore these paths to see what's the best way to meet this design brief. These are all open, so think of it as the superposition of all ideas. We're going to collapse it down to one thing as we go, right?
Quantum mechanical.
It's quantum mechanical for sure. That's a good question.
Like what, like wax teeth, only better for you? Oh yeah, that are like little.
But instead of needing the brush at all, right, you just have this thing that you chew and then it's gone and
Yeah.
you put it together and you put it in your mouth and you don't have to use the brush at all.
See, so the remarkable thing here is how this little idea becomes so generative. I mean, you just want to keep going. It's like you want to kind of luxuriate in the imagination of this possible world, find all the things that could be there. All of them they have they're good, it's good stuff. It's almost like you could see each one of these is around this theme, And there's this wonderful competition going on in the marketplace. So Colgate has their one thing in this particular vector. Who else? Procter & Gamble, they might be Colgate. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nabisco has something. Starbucks came out with something.
The competition is going to be fierce, right? All of the ideas that people have mentioned, somebody's going to want to run with one of those, right? And we'll see which one wins in the market. But at this point in prototyping, we would be thinking about maybe we want to prototype all three. Maybe we need to have chemists and food scientists on board to try to design the dog treat equivalent, the chewable that brushes your teeth for you. It's great to think out of the box. Like, why do we have to brush our teeth? Why is that a requirement? Kids don't want to. I don't want to. But let's figure out a better way to do it, right? I just don't want my teeth to fall out.
I see you sitting in the room, ready, okay, next, and these people walking in, wheeling a cart in lab coats.
Exactly. Now chew this and see what happens.
Also be like for pediatric dentists to have a different way for them to clean children's teeth, so it wasn't so scary.
Right.
It's awesome.
They bring a sloth in the room.
And that's where Andrea's robot can come in as well, because if we were still brushing, the robot either could help you brush or it brushes as well and helps you understand what to do and maybe even watches you. If it's a real robot, it's going to have some level of intelligence to see how you're doing, right? Okay. So we've listed a few use cases. They're not all the same product. Like they're different use cases, but we have a bunch that we've listed. So step 4, the value proposition. We're kind of hinting at that now. What is it best at? What does it need to do? And also, why is that better than what we do today? So today, we teach kids to brush their teeth. Maybe we give them an electric toothbrush that has a little song that plays or lights that blink to get them excited. But let's think about how is this better than what we see today? Exactly. It's always 9 out of 10 dentists, right? What's that other one dentist thinking? What is going on there?
Yeah, what's up? Troublemaker.
Kids suffer a lot when they lose teeth.
Oh, yeah.
They have new teeth coming in, and there's really not any dental ways to deal with that.
Yeah, no, we not in my house so much, but a lot of people resort to the tooth fairy to try to make it all better. You with the trauma of losing a tooth.
I can see some kind of Lego intervention where you like shore up the loose tooth, or you replace it,
Oh, yeah.
or you make the kid more aware of when the tooth is going to fall out, or reduce the pain of a tooth that's already wobbling.
Nice.
Just rebuild their loose dentition.
Yeah.
That snaps together.
The proposition would be to make the dentist less scary. It's a scary place for a little kid.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up, but to get them to a point where like going to the dentist is this fun, pleasurable, cool thing, not the scary, really helps them.
Yeah, that would be great. I think and many of the ideas that we've had would fit that, would support that. I think the robot would be cute, right? And maybe the kid brings the robot home from the dentist the first time, and that's the collaboration with Lego is to theme it like that.
Even the Lego thing, just the brand, in a way, has this kind of fun, playful component to it. It's like, I don't know, does Lego, it's like we gotta deal with the fact that all our products are made out of frozen oil.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna get into kids' dentistry.
It's a logical connection actually, and for the other idea that's still floating around of the assemble your own toothbrush too, there's a fun component to that for kids as well, which is you can be creative in the way you build your toothbrush. Every toothbrush is different, it's unique, you put it together, and it does the job maybe in a more traditional sense, but it's your personal design. You don't have to follow the instructions.
I can see the TikTok ads with like all these elaborate toothbrush.
It'd be like competitions, right, for the best combination of Legos to make a toothbrush out of. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
I want to add, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's something fun too about the idea of the candy that brushes your teeth. Back to the chewing.
Yeah.
Thing. Things that go together.
Yeah.
I've never seen. Has anybody seen anything like that? I know for dogs for sure, but for humans.
Candy that brushes your teeth, that chewing sort of idea.
I will imagine that, like, get like flavor bricks. You can put together what flavor you want your toothpaste to be, and then you put it inside the chewable wrapper, you put it in your mouth, and that's what brushes your teeth.
Yeah. So for anyone who
That's
couldn't hear, we're talking. I'll repeat a little bit so folks at the back can hear. So we're talking about the sort of 3-ish ideas we have. One of them is still needs to be prototyped, but it's the idea of candy, chewables that will brush your teeth for you. So we're talking about different variations on that.
Total
on
Willy
that
Wonka.
theme.
That's a Willy
It's
Wonka.
very Willy Wonka kind of a thing. Yeah, you're either going to turn into a blueberry or get your teeth brushed, one or the other.
Pills that you choose to see if you got
Hold, 1 second.
chewing gum that brushes your teeth and didn't help or continue.
Okay, so we'd want to get that and try it. Like that would be part of the process. Would be to send someone to Japan if necessary to go obtain this product. You'll go. Yeah. Thank you for volunteering. Okay, let me.
I want to add something really quickly before things start to fall into something that actually makes sense, because I'm picking up a lot of notes that indicate that we're approaching that territory. So Lego, maybe it's a robot, maybe it's cute, maybe there's some worker doing something in your mouth. So before we keep going, I just want to say that I think maybe you can add from your perspective, but maybe I'm speaking from the three of us, that when you are involved in this kind of work, there is a certain awareness that if you after a while, you get good at things. And that means that you have this intellectual process that you trust and that you're comfortable, and you just start to automatically apply it to all the briefs that come your way. And after a while, that's incredibly dangerous, because depending on the kind of work that you do, it will give you answers pretty fast, and you might even get a pat on the back from the client. But if you're doing super out there work, it's not good enough. So you need to pause. I don't know, maybe every few years. I would say I do it every 3-4 years, and really assess your intellectual comfort zone in approaching a problem. And when you do that and you reassess, it's kind of inevitable that you go to a process that tests out things that might feel silly or a little bit off, or okay, maybe this doesn't go anywhere, or this just makes absolutely no sense. And that actually means is good. Just keep going and just keep exploring that space, and then you will fall again into an intellectual comfort zone. But what we're trying to do here is propose that, is expose you live to a very funny, silly example of how you might start to walk that line.
Yeah, I think let's get through these really fast, and we're going to spend more time on that part of the process. I think we'll get to in a second. But you're exactly right. So we'd move just to get through the steps really fast. We're going to move through the requirements of, now again, we still have multiple ideas. It doesn't have to be one thing just yet. But in answering the question, what must it include to succeed, I think we kind of have already hinted at it. We've said it's got to result in your teeth being healthier and brushed, and it's got to work for kids potentially. So it's got to keep the interest of kids. Those are sort of the top 2 requirements that we've heard. You can always add in a few more, saying it has to be affordable. We didn't say that, but that would probably be a given assumption that, Lego sets, they have different price ranges, but this would be one that you wouldn't want it to be $1,000. You might want it to be, somewhere between $50 and maybe $150 kind of dollars. That would be in the same range as other solutions for this. And then, there's other requirements of like, well, can you sell it? Is it safe, right? I would worry about the chewable ones to say, does it work? That would be one of the things you'd have to really vet and determine. Is it safe? Is it going to be blowback? Are you going to need, FDA approval? All those kinds of things you start to think about. Now we start getting a little more sober here, right? It's been fun.
Or FCC approval.
FCC, in some cases, you actually need radio license to be able to put this thing out there. So that's real quick what we do on step 5. And now I think we can spend a little more time on the last step here, step 6, and talk about the idea of multiple prototypes, because we're still in the quantum mechanical realm here. It can be many different things. We haven't collapsed the waveform down to one. And in all the projects I've worked on, it's been like that. It's been like, well, the ideas are still alive. They may start to fall off the table as you've proven them to be less practical or more expensive, or not what we want to do, but we're still trying everything. And I'll give you guys a chance to talk about this in a second. The one thing that I want to say is, I'm going to repeat this from the beginning of the talk, is that the most important thing to do, I think, 2 things. The most important 2 things to do in prototyping are find the magic, so that everybody who tries your prototype, it won't be the complete product, it won't do everything, but you want to find the magic, because that's the thing that's going to carry you through hundreds or thousands of iterations, right? You don't know how many iterations it's going to take to get to the final thing. Everybody on the team has to feel excited about it and like this is still the right thing to do. So you want to try to find that magic, and if you iterate more and you lose the magic, go back to where you still had the magic, because it is the thing that's gonna, it's the fairy dust that's gonna let it get to the end. And the other is the stakeholder concerns that I mentioned. So as a really good prototyper, not everybody does this. There's some great prototypers I've worked with who have amazing ideas, but they miss this one step, which is listen to the stakeholders, ask for what their concerns are, and then build your early prototypes that directly meet those concerns. So if somebody who is a decision maker says, I think it's going to be too expensive, show them how it can be cheap. If they say, I think it's going to leave kids with sugar on their teeth, show them how, however we need to prototype it, that can be solved. And answer those questions as they come up, or before they come up, ideally, if you can. And that will help carry you through the whole iteration process. When things start getting really hard is when you start trying to make it real. Like, okay, what chemistry do we use for the chewable? How complex is the robot? How many moving parts? Or what happens when kids don't build a viable toothbrushing robot themselves and it doesn't work? How do you help them, right? So that's when things get hard. But to hold you through all that, keep the magic going. What's your secrets for that? Andrea, did you want to add to that?
All right, so this is what I would do. First, I want to reiterate what Avi said in the first line over there. You have to make multiple prototypes, each testing a different dimension of what that product has to achieve. There is no one prototype that shows everything in the first stage. So I'm just going to pick one dimension and just tell you kind of what goes through my head right now on the spot. The dimension I would be interested in here is what kind of mental models are we developing in relationship to the product? Or the other way around, what kind of mental models will the use of this product develop in your mind? And the way I would do that, I would actually do a virtual reality experience where you see a magnified mouth and teeth, and I would play out a story there. So picking up on the idea from over there, that maybe you chew some gum and there's a story about how all of these Lego figures are actually working on cleaning the sugar of your teeth and your gums. I would play that out as a story, and I would use, I would coin one or two verbs that are connected to the action that happens with these toy figures in your mouth. And I would have a group of testers, expose them to this whole mise-en-scène in virtual reality, and then ask them questions afterwards that have to do with cleaning their teeth, and see at what point do they start to think of cleaning teeth using the verbs in that story and in terms of the action that I have just modeled for them. So basically I'm putting in their heads, I'm encouraging the development of thinking about clean teeth using my way and my actions and my verbs and my language. And then of course I'm gonna propose at a later stage the product, which is going to feel great to buy and to use because it's going to fit exactly into the kind of mental model that they already have about cleaning teeth. And no other product will be able to go against that, because it's not going to feel like the right kind of fit. It's not going to feel like anything else cleans the teeth just like this one.
Jillian, you want to take it?
Yeah.
We'll go to questions.
Okay, cool. So I'll be brief. So my approach to doing this kind of prototyping is design fiction, and that is just finding the artifacts from the worlds that I sort of imagine. And oftentimes that might happen with a friend of mine, Tony Dunn, who also wrote a wonderful book called Speculative Everything, referred to as the adjacent now. So the thing that this world could be if things were slightly different, if some other counterfactual had happened in the past. So for example, one recent project was imagining a world in which the Sony Walkman didn't explode on the scene the way it did, but rather the Sony Aibo did. So if anyone knows the Sony Aibo, the robot dog, if that really took off and the Sony Walkman didn't, what kind of world would we be living in now? It would be a world filled with, robots and androids, and it would just be as normal and ordinary as someone walking around with a pair of headphones listening to music. And so what artifact do you make in order to sense and feel into that world? And so I wrote a I wrote a book called Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. So it's the PK Dick, but rather than it being a science fictional story, it's a factual story that's sort of like a self-help guide for helping you understand. You know, if you have a dog, you might get a little book like Understanding the Psyche of Your Dog. Or if you have like an adolescent kid, what's in the mind of your 13-year-old that they're going crazy? This would be that kind of book, talking about a world in which we are just amongst androids. And so that's my way of really trying to work into these, ask the questions and do it in a form that, you know, is something that you can hold in your hand and wander into this world. So this just came from an adjacent world, came from someplace on this side. Anyone want this, by the way? Whoever gets up here first.
Oh, Stampede. All right, Julian's got all the best giveaways. So, okay, to try to bring it home, and then we'll have a few minutes left for questions before the end of the hour. So I think the thing we wanted to make clear is this is important to have fun in doing this, right? I think you saw that as people were shouting things out. If we'd been like, no, that's a terrible idea, and made people feel bad, it would not work. This has to be something where you're encouraging out-of-the-box thinking and everyone to give their ideas. So make sure it's fun for everybody, even if it's serious. And, you know, I think all of us have been in these stages where we think too hard and we get into analysis paralysis, become overwhelmed by the solution space. It can be that way, but this is one of the paths through it. I think that's the one we want to promote. So just in closing before questions, and if you have questions, please come up to the microphone so that will be recorded. I hope that we have a good recording of all the audience feedback as well, but it's a little risky. But come up to the mic if you have additional questions. But now, just in terms of how to like follow us or continue the conversation, Andreea, you want to talk about how you're reachable and so mention your company name again, I guess, and anything else you're doing.
Reachable, yes. My company name is NOMENA, and it would be great if you want to connect and keep in touch. We're pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Good. Julian?
Near Future Laboratory, and I'm one of the only Julian Bleekers on the internet. I'm very accessible.
And I'm pretty sure I am the only Avi Bar-Zeev in the world, as far as I can tell. There's other people who have very similar names, but it's easy to find me on LinkedIn as well. My company website is realityprime.com. I have a podcast now with Helen Papagiannis. We've recorded 3 episodes so far, and that's called Reality Plus Us. So come check that out. And the last thing I'll plug is the XR Guild, which is a nonprofit that we've started that is meant for anybody working in spatial computing. If you call yourself a professional or academic or whatever you want, we'd love you to join if you value ethics. We want people who care about ethics to come. You have to agree to the principles that we currently have to get in, and then we can change them if we want later. But the goal is to try to make the entire field more ethical by bringing all the people who really care about ethics together to help teach. Until the day where they start teaching ethics in school again, we're going to have to cover the gap with adult education and teaching people about it. So please check that out. It's xrguild.org. All right. Any questions? We have, I don't know how much left, but maybe about 5 minutes left.
Hello.
Hi.
Really enjoyed the exercise. It was super interactive. It was great. I had a question. Well, just to introduce myself, I'm a senior product designer at GoodNotes. And I wanted to ask, how do you deal with getting buy-in to have time to prototype so that you could then prototype? I don't know if it makes sense, because I experience a little bit of a chicken or egg. So which comes first? So
like you need permission in your job to go
yeah.
prototype.
I find myself like working weekends to prototype something just to convince stakeholders to allow me to spend more time working on it. So how do you deal with that?
Well, the way I've dealt with it is to have my job be prototyping. I mean, I have the license to do it because that's what I was hired to do. And if you're doing it on your free time and 20%, I'd say do the prototypes as you're doing them, but then take it to your boss and say, hey, can I make this official? Can I make this 20% of my job? Can I make it 50% of my job if you really are good at that and doing it? And if the prototypes that you show them are valuable to them, then they might say yes. So I think it's worth trying that. And it is its own discipline. I think there's design and there's prototyping, and you don't have to be, there's an overlap for sure, but there's dedicated prototyping where you don't have to be the one that designed the final product. You're the one that helps get the product off the ground. in the first place. And yeah, I think every company should have that, because the argument that you can make is, you guys are going to spend $10 million, $100 million on the final product. Why don't you spend less than $1 million on prototyping it? Because then you can decide what not to do, so you never waste your money.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Hi. So, Andrea, you specifically mentioned, I think the verbiage used was the danger of these sort of affordances, or these hardened sort of workflows, these ideas, these constructs that are just, they become assumed because they're just so flatlined, or because they're reinforced. So the psychology of positive reinforcement is a compelling one, but I always think of things in terms of software, because that's what I do. So in machine learning, it's very easy to sort of break that paradigm, because you have these two hyperparameters. You have one for exploitation, which works on using patterns and things that it's seen before because it knows they work, and you have another one that balances it, which is exploration, which prevents overfitting. So it allows it to move around more and not base as much of its final decision on the patterns and things that it's seen before that it knows works. How do you extrapolate that kind of concept to working with people?
I think our assumptions about what is innate and what's not in our thinking patterns and in our behaviors are extremely conservative. So the question is, how do you convince people otherwise? People don't really, they're not aware of just how much flexibility we have, because change happens very slowly. So within one's lifetime, the amount of change that you're exposed to, it's low. So when something really catastrophic happens, then you will witness just how quickly people are able to adapt. But because adapting costs us resources and it's painful, we just don't do it so much. So to answer your question is, I think the question is, to what extent do you make people aware that they're undergoing change? And to what extent do you just make a product that makes them change without them being aware of it? And of course, I think the second type of practice is unethical. So I'm very interested in developing tools and products that makes people not just aware of how the use of this product is changing them, but puts the parameters and the variables into their hands. So somehow these knobs you can turn are embedded in the tool that they're using. So I hope that answers the question. So how do I think we can put the people inside this process? How much is exploration and how much is change, I think, or what I know what the two things that you mentioned. So the answer is, I develop tools that puts those toggles in people's hands so people can experiment themselves with how much and how quick and in what direction can their behaviors and thought patterns change as a consequence of the use of the tool.
Thanks. All right, the next question, thank you.
As I understand it, Steve Jobs hated focus groups. And so I love this notion of sort of intellectual comfort zone or exploratory comfort zone. And so when we come back around in the process and ask the stakeholder again, how do we make sure that doesn't limit, like come back and reconstrain the possibility of me getting something that I didn't know I really needed?
Can I answer that one? Want that? Yeah. Okay, Julian wants to answer that one.
So it's a really good point, because having worked in a design studio at Nokia, oftentimes this would be an issue. There would be this tension between product designers who had a certain sense of an expansive imagination about what could be. Let me put it that way. And were less inclined to listen to what the focus group would say, because again, it's the point of like, well, the future is what I heard Elon said, as opposed to imagining into a possible world that maybe people don't yet understand or even accept or haven't experienced. So what took them so long to put wheels on luggage? There are these beautiful ads from like the 60s and 70s of people happily carrying these big luggage around as they go on their trips someplace. And what was going on? It took an expansive imagination to push into a possible world and had trouble doing it. Like people didn't want it. Macy's was like, I don't see it. Why would people want to do this? What about the Porters Union? What are they going to say about it? And so I think there's a certain sense of ambition and a sense of, I see a world, I'm dreaming into a world, and now I got to pull people into this world to see it and see how they respond to it. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like when I created Amida, people were like, this is the stupidest idea ever. No one's going to want it. But there are people who do. And it doesn't mean it's going to change the whole world, but it's going to touch some people in a particular way where they're like, that's the world that I dream of. That's the world I want to inhabit. And maybe not for everyone, just like not everyone's an iPhone person. Not everyone's a Vision Pro person. But you will touch people in a certain way, and I think that's the goal. You want to find the people who you're going to be able to touch and not worry about dominating or taking over the world of toothbrushes.
I think there was a little bit of the question was also about, is it okay to design in a vacuum? Like if you don't have the access to real people outside of the company, and I'm not gonna pick on Apple in this case. I think there are definitely companies who lead with their own thoughts about the future, and they don't come and necessarily ask consumers, what do you think you need? They just build it the best that they can think about it. But I guarantee you later in the process they do ask people, they do user studies, they do figure things out. It doesn't always start in the beginning of the process. And I think the fear sometimes is that if you ask people what they want, they'll give you an extension of what they already know. And so if you really want to do something revolutionary, you kind of have to just look inside for a little bit and see what might be different, what might be magical, and run through these exercises to get to a new world. But then ground it, right? You still want to ground it before you build it and ship it, because you don't want to build something that nobody wants at the end of the day. It's just a slightly different process. But all the companies I've worked for, I think to a good degree, have started with what about the customer? What does the customer even want? Even Amazon is one of their leadership principles, customer obsession. It's always really about that first. And at least for the successful products it was. I could probably point to a few unsuccessful products that I worked on where there wasn't enough of that. And then you saw the result of the product not actually working when it was launched. One last question.
Hi, my name's Ernesto. I run as a design fiction project myself. I'm the CEO of a fictional corporation called Object Solutions. And I invent a lot of, it's sort of a dark satire on consumer tech, right? So looking at something like the TBD catalog, I'm just curious about what sorts of audiences or venues or channels that particular work lands best in, because in a 2050 track at South by Southwest or among designers, that's has a welcome home, right? But what audiences have you seen resonate with it, and what are the reactions that are most valuable?
Yeah, so it runs from people who are just fans of ephemera and peculiar things, who I think are just like highly kind of imaginative. They like the idea of building worlds through artifacts. They like the idea of this something in there about translating an idea into its form as if it existed in the world. So these are people who are fans, I don't know, fans of fiction, fans of ideas. But then I think in a more commercial context, so like the serious context, it's evocative because people start seeing the ways in which they can represent their ideas in a form that is in a structure that is very familiar. Like any company who makes a product has to have an advertisement for the product. They have to have an idea of how it's going to be represented on Amazon or the Apple Store or whatever. You have to do that work of translating this dream you have into something that other people can relate to in a structure that is readily identifiable. There are other structures, so like Bruce writes fiction, right? So you can represent an idea of a world that he might have in his head as a form of fiction. And then some of us want to represent ideas in these other kinds of ways in which we have a certain legibility and ability to translate that. It might be a little film, it might be an advertisement, whatever it might be. And so I think that's what it opens up, and that's what people are drawn to. It's like, oh my gosh, I can tell a story about a world through a product catalog. Never heard of that before. That's amazing. Think of all the things that we could do, and you have all the skills and the tools and the visual sensibilities and all that kind of stuff to do it. You're like, I'm doing it anyway, right? why not do it for something that that doesn't exist yet, the not true yet, and give people a sense of it, and then, you know, people engage it in this way where they're like, whoa, what is this? Where do I get it? I want to buy one of these. Okay, now we're talking.
Great, thank you.
All right, very good questions. Thanks for those of you who stuck around. I know there's new things coming up, but we'll be here for a few more minutes if you want to talk to anybody in person. Thank you so much. Have a great day.